The wind moved across the old frontier like a tired memory that refused to die. Dust rose from the wagon trail in soft spirals, drifting through the last light of the day, as if the earth itself was trying to forget what had passed over it. And there she stood, at the edge of everything she once called home. A woman of quiet strength, around 33 winters old, her hands still marked by the life she had built with patience and care. The kind of woman the town used to nod at, but never truly see. Not fragile, but gently overlooked like a candle burning in a bright room. Her name no longer mattered in the way it once did, because tonight, even names fell heavy. Behind her, the small house near the quarry stood still, wooden walls softened by years of wind and sun. A place built with hope, laughter once hidden in its corners, and dreams that used to sit near the window like morning light. But now, it felt like a hollow shell remembering its own past. Inside, silence waited. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that follows betrayal. She stepped forward slowly, her boots pressing into the dry earth. Each sound felt louder than it should have been. Every breath heavier, every thought sharper, because she knew, she had known for days, maybe longer, that something inside her life had already ended before she was ever told. Her husband, the man she once believed would walk beside her through every storm. He had always been charming in public, smiling like a man carved from gold and confidence. But at home, his warmth faded like fire left in the rain. He spoke less each week, looked through her instead of at her, and touched nothing in her world except the things that benefited him. At first, she called it tiredness, then distance, then work. But truth, like rust beneath paint, always finds a way to show itself. It wasn't a single moment that broke her life. It was 1,000 small ones. The missing money, the whispered meetings in town, the way his name stopped appearing in places it should have been. And finally, the silence. That unbearable silence that replaced every promise he ever made. That morning, he had not argued. He had not confessed. He had not even looked guilty. He simply stood by the door, adjusting his coat as if leaving for a routine trip, as if she was not standing there watching the end of everything she believed in. And then he said it, not loudly, not cruelly, worse than that, casually. I won't be coming back the same way. That was all. No apology, no explanation, no goodbye that meant anything. Just a sentence that erased years of shared life like chalk and rain. Now, hours later, she walked through the empty rooms of that life. Her fingers brushed the edge of a wooden chair he once sat in. The table where they once shared meals now felt like a stranger's object. Even the air inside the house seemed to hesitate around her, as if unsure whether she still belonged there. She stopped near the window. Outside, the quarry stretched like a sleeping giant carved from the bones of the earth. Beautiful, silent, unforgiving. Her reflection in the glass looked distant. Not broken, not yet, but something in her eyes had already begun to leave. She remembered how she used to wait for him in the evenings, how she used to listen for footsteps, how hope used to sit inside her chest like a patient bird. But hope, she realized now, does not always fly away loudly. Sometimes it simply stops returning home. A soft creak behind her made her turn. No one was there, only the door swaying gently in the wind. Still, she spoke into the emptiness, her voice barely more than breath. You chose silence over me. The words did not echo. They simply disappeared into the wooden walls. Night began to fall. The quarry outside turned darker, its edges dissolving into shadow. Inside the house, memories rose like ghosts refusing to leave. His laughter once filling the room, his boots near the door, his hand brushing past hers without warmth. And then nothing, only absence. She sank into a chair, not because she was tired, but because standing felt like resisting gravity itself. For a long time, she did not cry. Not yet. Grief had not fully arrived. It was still walking toward her, slowly, like a storm deciding how much to destroy. And then came the moment that changed everything. A sound outside, hooves fading into distance. A wagon leaving. Not hers. His. She rushed to the window, but there was nothing left to see. Only dust drifting down like forgotten prayers. He was gone. Not leaving a husband behind, but leaving a life behind. And her inside it. Something inside her cracked quietly then. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply enough that she felt it settle into her bones. She placed her hand over her mouth, not to stop a scream, but to stop herself from collapsing into something she might not return from. Hours passed. The house grew colder. The wind grew sharper. And she moved through it all like a shadow, learning how to exist without light. She gathered what little she needed, not because she had decided everything yet, but because her body understood what her heart refused to accept. She was no longer waiting. Outside, the night stretched wide and endless. The quarry called to her in silence, not as escape, but as absence, a place where the world would not ask questions, where pain might finally stop having an audience. She stood at the door one last time, looking back at the house that had once held her life like a fragile promise. And for a brief moment, she almost stayed. Almost. But then she whispered into the dark, "I will not beg to be remembered." And she stepped forward, into the night, into the dust, into the beginning of her disappearance from everything that had once broken her. The night did not follow her like a shadow. It opened instead like a vast, patient silence. Her wagon moved slowly along the forgotten edge of the quarry lands, where the earth broke into stone and memory alike. The wheels whispered against dry soil, and every sound felt swallowed before it could become real. It was not escape. It was disappearance. A woman learning how to vanish without leaving a scream behind. The quarry grew larger as she traveled deeper into its forgotten edges. Not the working side where men still hammered stone and dust rose like breath from the earth, but the abandoned side, where even time seemed reluctant to step. Cliffs rose like sleeping giants, their faces carved by centuries of wind and silence. Broken paths curled between them like old scars. And then she saw it, a cabin, half hidden behind stone and overgrown brush, as if the land itself had tried to forget it existed. Wood weathered to a soft gray, a roof bowed under years of loneliness, windows dull like tired eyes that had stopped expecting the world. But it stood, still standing, as if waiting not for people, but for someone who had nowhere else to go. She stepped down from the wagon slowly. Her boots touched the ground with hesitation, as though the earth might reject her. The wind here was different, not cruel, not gentle, just empty. The kind of emptiness that does not judge what you bring into it, only accepts. Inside the cabin, dust lay thick like forgotten breath. Spider webs stretched across corners where voices had never been heard in years. A broken chair leaned against a wall like a tired man, refusing to fall completely. She ran her fingers across the wooden table. No memories here. No laughter. No betrayal either. Only absence. And somehow, that felt like mercy. She did not cry as she cleaned. She did not speak. She simply moved through the space as if moving through her own undoing. Sweeping dust from floors felt like brushing away pieces of her old life. Fixing a broken hinge felt like touching something inside herself that still remembered how to hold. Each small task became a quiet ritual. Not survival. Rebirth disguised as effort. That first night, she lit a small fire in the hearth. The flame trembled before finding strength. So did she. Outside, the quarry stretched endlessly under moonlight, its stone faces glowing faintly like sleeping memories. She sat close to the fire, wrapped in a thin blanket, listening to the silence. Not the silence of absence anymore, but the silence of distance. A world no longer reaching for her. Days began to pass like soft footsteps. She learned the rhythm of isolation. Water from a nearby stream, wood gathered from broken branches, bread stretched carefully, not wasted. She spoke less each day, until even her thoughts began to soften into quiet shapes. Sometimes she would sit outside the cabin and simply watch the quarry breathe. Stone does not rush. Stone does not question. It only exists. But even silence carries weight. At night, memory returned. Not in words, in sensations. The sound of a door closing behind her husband. The empty space beside her in bed. The slow realization that she had been loving someone who had already left long before he physically did. And in those moments, her chest would tighten, but she would not break. Not here, not in this forgotten place. On the third morning, she noticed something unusual. A stack of firewood placed neatly beside her door. Fresh, clean cut, not hers. Her first instinct was fear. Her second, confusion. Her third, silence. She did not touch it for a long time, just watched it as if it might disappear if she believed in it too quickly. The next day, the water bucket she had left outside was repaired. A small crack sealed with careful work. Not crude, not careless. Intentional, like someone had been watching without wanting to be seen. That evening, she found a piece of wood placed near the steps. Carved slowly, imperfectly. 3 words. You are not alone here. She read it again and again. Not trusting it, not rejecting it, simply letting it exist beside her fear. That night, she did not sleep as deeply as she should have. But for the first time since leaving the town, she did not feel entirely unguarded. On the 4th day, she saw him. Not fully at first. Only a shape near the edge of the quarry path. A man standing still among stone and dust. Watching the cabin, but not approaching. Mid-30s, perhaps early 40s. Rugged in a quiet way, like someone shaped more by solitude than by people. He did not wave, did not speak. He simply turned away when she noticed him, as if his presence was never meant to be an intrusion, only reassurance. Later, she found a bundle of dried wood near her door again. This time, she stepped closer, not fearfully, not boldly, carefully, like touching a life she did not yet understand. But she did not see him again that day. Only his absence left gently behind. Something inside her shifted. Not trust, not yet, but awareness. The strange realization that she was no longer entirely invisible. And that frightened her more than loneliness ever had. Because loneliness she understood. But kindness without demand, that was unfamiliar. The quarry, meanwhile, began to whisper differently. Workers in distant routes spoke of a hidden cabin. Of smoke seen where no one was supposed to live, of footprints in forgotten stone paths. And with those whispers came another truth. The past, once buried, was beginning to move again. That night, she stood outside her cabin for a long time. The wind carried no answers, only distance. She looked toward the darkened paths where the man had been seen. And for the first time since she arrived, she wondered not just how to survive here, but whether she might one day belong. The quarry had learned her name without ever speaking it. Not in words, but in presence. In the way smoke now rose from her chimney, each morning like a quiet signal to the empty sky. In the way footsteps softened the dust path leading to her door. In the way silence no longer felt like punishment, but companionship. Time here did not rush. It healed the way rivers carve stone, slowly, insistently, without permission. She began to change without noticing it at first. Not in grand ways, but in the small, sacred details of living. Her hands grew steadier as she repaired broken furniture inside the cabin. Her mornings became softer, not with hope yet, but with routine. Water fetched before fear could speak. Firewood stacked before cold could arrive. A life rebuilt not from joy, but from endurance. And still she never spoke his name. The husband who had once been the center of her world now lived only as a shadow behind her thoughts. Not sharp anymore, not cutting, just present like a scar that no longer bled but refused to disappear. Sometimes she would pause while working, hands still in mid-motion, and feel it return. The memory of him leaving, the wagon disappearing into dust, the silence he left behind like a door that never closed properly. But something else now lived beside that memory. The quiet man. She still did not know his full story, and he did not ask for hers. He simply appeared when something needed fixing. A fence mended near the path. A bucket repaired with careful hands. Firewood left before winter could arrive. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were never sharp, only necessary, like stones placed carefully in a river so someone else could cross. One evening, she found him sitting near the edge of the quarry path. Not inside her space, not invading it, just nearby, as if respecting the invisible boundary of her loneliness. The wind moved between them, and for a long moment, neither spoke. It was she who finally broke the silence. Not with questions, but with truth that had nowhere else to go. I don't know how to be someone again. Her voice was soft, not broken, just uncertain. He did not look at her immediately, as if letting her words settle into the ground before touching them. Then he said quietly, "You don't have to be someone yet." And that was all. No advice, no demand, only permission to exist without definition. That night stayed with her longer than it should have. Not because it healed her, but because it did not try to. Days turned warmer. The quarry softened under shifting light. And slowly, something unfamiliar began to grow between them. Not romance. Not yet. Something more fragile. Trust shaped like distance, slowly shrinking. She began to notice the way he always stood slightly away from doors, as if never wanting to trap anyone inside a choice. The way he left before dusk, never staying long enough to be mistaken for permanence. The way he never asked to be needed, only present when presence was enough. And then, one storm came. Not violent like anger, but heavy like memory returning all at once. The sky darkened over the quarry in a slow, suffocating hush. Rain followed like a curtain dropping between past and present. Inside the cabin, wind forced itself through old wood and tired seams. A crack opened near the roof beam. Water began to fall inside, slow at first, then steadily, like something breaking its way back into her life. She tried to fix it alone, hands shaking in cold air, wood slipping under wet fingers. But the storm did not wait for her strength to catch up. And then, without warning, he was there, standing in the doorway, soaked, silent, not asking permission, not explaining, just stepping inside like someone who understood that help does not always arrive politely. Together, they worked. No urgency in conversation, only movement. He held the beam steady while she secured the rope. She passed tools without needing to be asked. Their hands crossed briefly in the dark, and neither pulled away. Outside, thunder rolled like distant memory trying to speak. Inside, something quieter was being built. Not the cabin, but the space between them. When the roof finally held again, neither spoke for a while. Only the sound of rain remained. Soft now, less violent, almost forgiving. She sat near the fire afterward, watching the steam rise from her soaked sleeves. And for the first time, she realized she was not alone in survival anymore. He spoke eventually, not looking at her, only toward the fire. You shouldn't have to rebuild everything twice. She understood he was not talking about the roof. And for a moment, her chest tightened, not with pain this time, but recognition, because she had rebuilt everything twice. Once for the life she lost, and once for the life she refused to stop living. Outside, the storm softened into silence. Inside, the fire steadied, and something unspoken settled between them. Not love yet, but the beginning of safety. But even healing has shadows. News travels in broken places faster than horses. And one evening, a distant rider passed through the lower town, speaking of a man searching. A husband, not changed, not remorseful, only driven by something closer to possession than memory. He'd been asking questions about a woman, about land near the quarry, about what he believed still belonged to him. When she heard this, something inside her tightened. Not fear exactly, but awakening. Because some parts of the past do not come back to apologize. They come back to reclaim. That night, she stood outside her cabin longer than usual. The quarry stretched before her like a sleeping giant holding secrets in its bones. Behind her, the cabin was warm now, alive in a way it had never been before. Inside it, a man who did not ask her to shrink. Outside it, a past that believed she still belonged to it. She whispered into the wind, "I did not survive to go back." And for the first time, she meant it fully. The quarry woke that morning beneath a heavy, colorless sky. Fog rolled through its stone ribs like wandering ghosts, softening every edge of the world until even distance felt uncertain. The wind had stopped speaking. The birds had gone silent. It was as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something it already feared. And she felt it before it arrived. Not in sound, but in memory. The kind of memory that presses against the skin like an approaching storm. She stood outside her cabin longer than usual. The fire inside still warm. The quiet man nearby already sensing the shift without needing to ask. He did not question her. He only looked toward the lower path of the quarry, where dust was beginning to rise in a thin, deliberate line. Someone was coming. Hooves broke the silence first. Slow, certain, not hurried like travelers, but heavy like ownership returning to claim what it believes was never lost. A wagon followed, and then her husband stepped down as if the land still remembered his name. Dressed neatly, too neatly for a place like this. His eyes moved over the quarry with irritation, as though offended it had continued existing without him. And then they found her, standing in front of the cabin, still, unmoving, not hiding, not running, just there. For a moment he smiled, not kindly, but like someone reopening a door they believed was never locked. "You always had a habit of disappearing," he said lightly, as if speaking to a memory rather than a person. She did not respond. Silence, this time, was not fear. It was decision. He took a step closer. His voice softened, practiced, familiar in the way old control often is. "I came to bring you back. This place, it's not life. It's exile." His gaze flicked toward the cabin, then the tools, then the quiet man standing slightly behind her. Something sharpened in his expression. "You've been surviving," he said slowly, almost amused, "but surviving isn't the same as belonging." That word, belonging, it once had power over her. Once, but not anymore. She finally spoke. Her voice was calm, not raised, not shaking, just clear in the way still water reflects truth. "I belonged to you when I believed I had to." A pause, wind moving gently between them now. Asking permission to exist is not the same as love. Something in his expression tightened. Control dislikes calm resistance more than anger. He tried again, softer this time. "You're alone here." But she did not flinch, because for the first time, she wasn't. The quiet man stepped forward then, not aggressively, not like a shield, but like a line that had already been drawn long before this moment. He stood beside her, not in front of her, beside her, and that difference changed everything. The husband noticed, and something in him shifted. Not fear yet, but uncertainty, because people like him understand possession, not equality. And what he saw now was not a woman waiting to be taken back, but a woman standing where she chose to remain. "You think this place changes anything?" The husband snapped now, frustration breaking through his polished voice. "She was nothing before me. She'll be nothing without me." The words hit the air, but did not land where he expected, because she no longer stood inside them. She took one step forward, then another, not toward him, but toward herself. And when she spoke again, it was not from pain anymore. It was from distance. "I was not nothing. A breath. I was only unseen by you." The silence that followed was heavier than the wind. Even the quarry seemed to pause. The husband tried once more, but his voice had lost certainty now. It cracked slightly. "You think he gestured toward the quiet man, "can give you anything I didn't?" She looked at him then, really looked, not with anger, not with grief, but with final understanding. "You never gave me anything," she said softly. "That is the difference you never noticed." For a moment, he stood still, as if the world had shifted slightly and he had not learned how to stand in it. The illusion he carried of importance, of control, of ownership began to loosen at its edges. He took a step forward again, but this time no one moved back. Not her, not the man beside her. And that is when he understood something he had never been forced to understand before. There was nothing left to take. The quarry wind returned slowly. Not violent, just present, like the world reclaiming balance. The husband's expression darkened, not with power, but with something far emptier. Loss, stripped of its excuses. He looked around once more, at the cabin, at her, at the life that had continued without him. And, for the first time, he was not part of it. He exhaled sharply, turned away, and walked back toward his wagon. No grand exit, no final words of control. Only dust rising behind him as the land quietly let him go. No one spoke until he disappeared beyond the stone ridges. Even then, the silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything that had finally ended. She did not smile. She did not collapse in relief. Instead, she simply stood there breathing, as if learning what air felt like when it was not tied to fear. The quiet man looked at her gently, not asking anything, not claiming anything, just there. And she realized something in that moment that did not need words. Safety was not someone who saves you. It is someone who stays when nothing is left to fight. She turned toward the cabin. The wind softened. The quarry no longer felt like exile. It felt like ground she had earned. Step by step, breath by breath, silence by silence. And for the first time since leaving everything behind, she did not feel like someone who survived a life. She felt like someone who had begun a new one. Some storms do not end with thunder. Some end with understanding. And some people return not to destroy us, but to show us how far we have already walked without them. If this story touched something inside you, tell me in the comments, where in this world are you watching from? Like the video if you believe healing is possible even after betrayal. Subscribe for more Wild West tales from forgotten hearts and hidden places. And remember, even in the quietest quarry of life, a broken soul can become something unshakably whole.